Okay, pretty heavy at the end of the last chapter, the Black Thing. They left this beautiful spot and ascended, went higher, and in the distance they could see only darkness. The stars were blocked out, and it was pure evil. Pure evil. And at the end, that dark thing we saw, she said, "Is that what my father's fighting?" The Tesseract, Chapter 5. Yes, Mrs. Witch said. He is behind the darkness so that even we cannot see him. Meg began to cry, to sob aloud. Through her tears, she could see Charles Wallace standing there, very small, very white. Calvin put his arms around her, but she shuddered and broke away, sobbing wildly. Then she was enfolded in the great wings of Mrs. Whatsit, and she felt comfort and strength pouring through her. Mrs. Whatsit was not speaking aloud. And yet through the wings Meg understood words. "My child, do not despair. Do you think we would have brought you here if there were no hope? We are asking you to do a difficult thing, but we are confident that you can do it. Your father needs help. He needs courage. And for his children, he may be able to do what he cannot do for himself." "Now," Mrs. Witch said, "are we ready?" "Where are we going?" Calvin asked. Again Meg felt an actual physical tingling of fear as Mrs. Witch spoke. "We must go behind the shadow." "But we will not do it all at once," Mrs. Whatsit comforted them. "We will do it in short stages." She looked at Meg. "Now we will tesser. We will wrinkle again. Do you understand?" "No," Meg said flatly. Mrs. Whatsit sighed. "Explanations are not easy when they're about things for which your civilization still has no words. Calvin talked about traveling at the speed of light. You understand that, little Meg?" "Yes," Meg nodded. "That, of course, is the impractical long way around. We have learned to take shortcuts wherever possible." "Sort of like in math?" Meg asked. "Like in math." Mrs. Whatsit looked over at Mrs. Who. "Take your skirt and show them." "La experiencia es la madre de la ciencia." Spanish, my dears. Cervantes. Experience is the mother of knowledge. Mrs. Who took a portion of her white robe in her hands and held it tight. "You see," Mrs. Whatsit said, "if a very small insect were to move from the section of skirt in Mrs. Who's right hand to her left, it would be quite a long walk for him if he had to walk straight across." Swiftly, Mrs. Who brought her hands, still holding the skirt together. "Now you see," Mrs. Whatsit said, "he would be there without that long trip. That is how we travel." Charles Wallace accepted the explanation serenely. Even Calvin did not seem perturbed. "Oh dear," Meg sighed. "I guess I am a moron. I just don't get it." "That is because you think of space only in 3 dimensions," Mrs. Whatsit told her. "We travel in the 5th dimension. This is something you can understand, Meg. Don't be afraid to try. Was your mother able to explain a tesseract to you?" "Well, she never did," Meg said. "She got so upset about it." "Why, Mrs. Whatsit?" "She said it had something to do with her and father." "It was a concept they were playing with," Mrs. Whatsit said, "going beyond the 4th dimension to the 5th. Did your mother explain it to you, Charles?" "Well, yes." Charles looked a little embarrassed. "Please don't be hurt, Meg. I just kept at her while you were in school till I got it out of her." Meg sighed. "Just explain it to me." "Okay," Charles said. "What is the 1st dimension?" "Well, a line." "Okay. The 2nd dimension?" "Well, you square the line. A flat square would be the 2nd dimension." "And the 3rd?" "Well, you'd square the 2nd dimension. Then the square wouldn't be flat anymore. It would have a bottom and sides and a top." "And the 4th?" "Well, I guess if you want to put it into mathematical terms, you'd square the square. But you can't take a pencil and draw it the way you can the first 3. I know it's got something to do with Einstein and time. I guess maybe you could call it the 4th dimension time." "That's right," Charles said. "Good girl. Okay, then. For the 5th dimension, you'd square the 4th, wouldn't you?" guess so. Well, the fifth dimension's a tesseract. You you add that to the other four dimensions, and you can travel through space without having to go the long way around. In other words, to put it in Euclid or old-fashioned plane geometry, a straight line is not the shortest distance between 2 points. For a brief, illuminating second, Meg's face had the listening, probing expression that was so often seen on Charles's. "I see," she cried. "I got it. For just a moment, I got it. I can't possibly explain it now. But there, for a second, I saw it." She turned excitedly to Calvin. "Did you get it?" He nodded. "Enough. I don't understand it the way Charles Wallace does, but enough to get the idea." "So now we go," Mrs. Witch said. "There is not all the time in the world." "Could we hold hands?" Meg asked. Calvin took her hand and held it tightly in his. "You can try," Mrs. Whatsit said, "though I'm not sure how it will work. You see, though we travel together, we travel alone. We will go first and then take you afterward in the backwash. That may be easier for you." As she spoke, the great white body began to waver. The wings dissolved into mist. Mrs. Who seemed to evaporate until there was nothing but the glasses, and then the glasses, too, disappeared. It reminded Meg of the Cheshire Cat. "I've often seen a face without glasses," she thought, "but glasses without a face? I wonder if I go that way, too. First me, and then my glasses." She looked over at Mrs. Witch. Mrs. Witch was there, and then she wasn't. There was a gust of wind, and a great thrust, and a sharp shattering as she was shoved through what? Then darkness, silence, nothingness. If Calvin was still holding her hand, she could not feel it. But this time she was prepared for the sudden and complete dissolution of her body. When she felt the tingling coming back to her fingertips, she knew that this journey was almost over. And she could feel again the pressure of Calvin's hand about hers. Without warning, coming as a complete and unexpected shock, she felt a pressure she had never imagined, as though she were being completely flattened out by an enormous steamroller. This was far worse than the nothingness had been. While she was nothing, there was no need to breathe. But now her lungs were squeezed together so that although she was dying for want of air, there was no way for her lungs to expand and contract, to take in the air that she must have to stay alive. This was completely different from the thinning of atmosphere when they flew up the mountain and she had to put flowers to her face to breathe. She tried to gasp, but a paper doll can't gasp. She thought she was trying to think, but her flattened out mind was unable to function as her lungs. Her thoughts were squashed along with the rest of her. Her heart tried to beat. It gave a knife-like sideways movement, but it could not expand. But then she seemed to hear a voice, or if not a voice, at least words flattened out like printed words on paper. "Oh no, we can't stop here. This is a two-dimensional planet, and the children can't manage here." She was whizzed into nothingness again, and nothingness was wonderful. She did not mind that she could not feel Calvin's hand, that she could not see or feel or be. The relief from the intolerable pressure was all she needed. Then the tingling began to come back to her fingers, her toes. She could feel Calvin holding her tightly. Her heart beat regularly, blood coursed through her veins. Whatever had happened, whatever mistake had been made, it was over now. She thought she heard Charles Wallace saying, his words round and full as spoken words ought to be. "Really, Mrs. Witch, you might have killed us." This time she was pushed out of the frightening fifth dimension with a sudden immediate jerk. There she was herself again, standing with Calvin beside her, holding on to her hand for dear life, and Charles Wallace in front of her, looking indignant. Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Witch were not visible, but she knew they were there. The fact of their presence was strong about her. "Children, I apologize," came Mrs. Witch's voice. "Now, Charles, calm down," Mrs. Whatsit said, appearing not as the great and beautiful beast she had been when they last saw her, but in her familiar wild garb of shawls and scarfs and the old tramp's coat and hat. "And we'll stop there. So when she was getting flattened when they were tesseracting, they were going to a two-dimensional planet. A little goof. All right. See you live on Tuesday.